Seems your background is noisy. Can't hear you. You are speaking. Hello, Basit. Good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, how you doing?
Fine. Please, can you introduce yourself to us, please?
My name is Babatunde Basidamilare. I am part of the beginners in PHP class. This is my first time trying PHP. I've been on HTML and CSS house, so I'm just a beginner here.
All right. I guess you will love this event, and this event is for you because I know you will learn more and add more to your experience. Yeah, thank you very
Yeah.
much for that. So you can drop your social media handle on the chat box so we can connect with you because I would like to connect with many people today. Oh.
Hmm.
Hello, Edith. Good afternoon. Please, can you introduce yourself to us, please?
Social media and
Hello, Edith. Okay. Hello, Timmy. Good afternoon. Please, can you introduce yourself to us, please?
Good afternoon.
Okay, good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, like my name is Rotimi Daru, and I'm currently an apprentice working with the PHP backend team.
All right. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Yes, once again, please, if you are just joining us, you can drop it in the chat box by telling us your name, what you do, and what your expectation is for this event. Because we would like to connect with you. All right, all right. All right, thank you very much for that. So once again, like I said, this event is brought to us by Binkup Dev Center, and you're all welcome to the PHP Meetup because I'm much excited to be part of this event. And I know you all will be excited as much as I am today. So I'll be talking about Binkup Dev Center here before handing over to the host of the event. So give me a few minutes. Let me just share my screen so you can know what Binkup Dev Center is all about and where we are located at. Yeah, thank you very much. So I'd like you to confirm if you can see my screen, please.
Yeah,
Yes, I
we
can
can
see your
we can see
screen.
your screen.
Yeah, I can see your screen first now.
All right, thank you very much for that. So this is Binkup Dev Center. So Binkup Dev Center is a multi-location technology talent development and solution platform. And we have our locations at different vicinity, the one near you and outside the country. So the one near us here, we have it at Yaba, Lagos, Ibadan, Oyo State, Kano State, Kaduna State, Ijebu-Igbo, Ogun State, Warri Delta State, and also in United Kingdom. And we are also planning on expanding to more locations. Yeah, so Binkup Dev Center focuses on three key pillars, which is your building tech talent, enhancing tech talent, and building startups. Are we together, please?
Yes, we are. We hear you.
All right. Thank
Yeah,
you.
together we are.
All right, we are good to go. So, like I said, it focuses on three key pillars, which is your building tech talent, enhancing tech talent, and also building startups. So, under these three key pillars, we have different services on it. So, under the building tech talent, we have our Binkup Academy, Binkup Tech at internship, Binkup Tech apprenticeship, and Binkup Global Tech program. So, under the second key pillar, which is your enhancing tech talent, we have our Binkup Tech Network, just like what we are having here, this community event. And also we have our Light Space, MBA Tech Visa, Bincom Mentoring Platform, and Bincom Tech Career Coaching. So we also have our Labs by Bincom under the third key pillars of the services. So as time goes on, before the question and answer section, I'll be enlightening you and show more about these services, like talking more about these services so you can know what these services are all about. Yeah. So once again, you're all welcome to the PHP Meetup. So I'd like to hand over to the host of the event for a few minutes before handing over to the host of the event. I would like us to get a notepad and a pen so you can jot something down and take something home. Yeah, thank you very much for that. Hello, Antonia, good afternoon. Hello, Antonia. Good afternoon.
Oh, good
Please
afternoon.
confirm.
Hi, Raj. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Good afternoon.
All right. So please confirm if you can still hear me. Hi, Raj. All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, you can start. I can hear you.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome us all to this event once again. My name is Antonia. I'm a backend developer here in Bincom. So we have our guest speaker among us, Mr. Ayodeji Adeshola, and also one of our own, Mr. Ladimeji Arokoyo. Like Hirat had mentioned earlier, so let's just get our notepad because I believe at the end of this event, we would have learned one or two new things. All right, so let's just pay attention and follow what our speakers have to say. So, all right, like I mentioned earlier, I'll just quickly introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Yodeji Adeshola. So, Mr. Yodeji Adeshola is a backend developer with a proven track record of delivering high quality, scalable web applications with extensive experience in Python and other technologies. He excelled in collaborative team settings, consistently. Can you still hear me, please? All right, so Mr. Ayodeji, in addition to his expertise in Python-based technologies, he has intermediate proficiency in PHP, and he has contributed to several projects utilizing the language. Similarly, he has experience with C and C++, having worked on various projects that require these languages. While not yet an expert, his hands-on experience with C and C++ and PHP enables him to approach projects with versatility and adaptability. Moreover, he is proficient in version control using Git and GitHub, ensuring efficient collaboration and code management and practices across projects. Furthermore, he is well versed Furthermore, is well versed in front-end technologies, including HTML and CSS, ensuring seamless integration between back-end and front-end components. Its proficiency extends to various auxiliary technologies such as Redis, WebSockets, Django channels, and VPS Django hosting, further enriching skill sets and enabling him to deliver comprehensive solutions tailored to client needs. Mr. Ayodeji is also a founder. All right, without wasting much of our time, I would like to welcome our first speaker, which is our guest speaker, in person of Mr. Ayodeji Adeshola. You can have the floor, sir. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me?
Yes,
Like
I can hear
clearly?
you.
All right. Thank you. So as Miss Antonia said, my name is, Ayodeji, and I'm a backend developer and tech YouTuber. So today I'll be speaking about automating workflows and basically speaking about CI/CD for PHP projects. So first of all, I would just like to share my screen. Let's see. Hold on, give me a moment. Okay, so can everyone see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen.
All right. So we're going to be talking about automating your workflow with CI/CD. So we need to first of all understand what CI/CD means. So CI/CD stands for continuous integration and continuous deployment. So it's just a step-by-step process that takes you from the process of developing your projects locally on your computer to the phase of deploying it. So where you have thousands and millions of people using your projects globally. So this is basically what CI/CD means. It's the process of taking your project from the development phase to deployment phase where it is publicly available. So in between that development phase and deployment phase, we can build something that is called like a workflow or a pipeline that helps us to make that whole process very, very simple and very, very easy. So I just have a bit of a write-up here. So it says, imagine an assembly line, each step. Imagine an assembly line, each step from coding to deployment is automated, ensuring consistency and speed. So that was what I had, explained about what the pipeline is. So it takes you from the development stage up onto the deployment stage, and it makes it really, really efficient. Then we have continuous integration, continuous delivery. So CI/CD is a workflow that automates the process of building, testing, and deploying your code. So you might not really understand what that means right now, but as we progress, you are going to see exactly what that means. So in this next page, we have the question of why do you need to automate? Why do we need CI/CD integration? Now, as developers, usually, when you start learning how to program, the first sort of things that you learn is, the basics, variables, functions, and all of those things. And then you graduate into learning how to, build simple projects, combining all of those concepts to build a single project. And I'm sure we all have various projects that we have built locally. So you might then be wondering, how do I take this project from my development environment and put it in a place where people can just visit it online and interact with it? Now, you can do this using a very manual method, and I'll give you an example. So when I was working on my startup, before I had even really, really learned how to integrate CI/CD and set up a pipeline, what I had to do was, anytime I make a change in the code base locally, I would have to then push all of those changes to my GitHub repository that stores all the code. And then after doing that, I would have to manually SSH into the server, that's log into the server. And then I will have to manually clone all of the changes that we made in that repository. And after cloning all the changes, I would have to restart all the services that are helping the websites run, that are helping the backend run. So I would have to restart Redis, I would have to restart Celery, I would have to restart RabbitMQ and a bunch of services. And then after doing that, I would have to make sure that my database is up to date. That is my database schema, the models. I would have to make sure that everything is up to date because the database was also hosted on the server. Then after making sure that the database was up to date, I will now have to factor in any change for my static files, that is my HTML, my JavaScript, my images, my CSS files. I have to make sure that my static files are properly configured, and then I will now have to worry about running the project. So it was a very, very long process, doing everything manually from writing the code to deploying it on the server. So it was a very long and tedious process. So what I figured out was that in order to make this process very, very easy for me and make it streamlined and also make it very efficient, I need a CI/CD pipeline. So the CI/CD pipeline basically helps me to, or helps any developer to abstract all of those processes away from being manual to being automatic. So right now, after I integrated the CI/CD pipeline, the moment I make a push to my GitHub repository, the pipeline automatically clones, it automatically pulls the changes, and it does all of those things for me. It's makes sure my static files are working perfectly. It makes sure that my database schema is up to date, and it performs everything for me, all of that manual process. So all I have to do is just worry about writing my code and writing my tests. And once I have done all that, I can just push it to my GitHub repository, and then my pipeline is going to run immediately. It's going to run my tests, and if those tests pass, it is then going to proceed to deploy the project. So that is still like an overhead explanation of what it does. So as we proceed, we're going to look at the pipeline itself in detail. So we have this page that says why automate. So the first option is manual deployments lead to errors, delays, and inconsistencies. Now, this is one of the issues that I had faced when I was trying to, deploy that project, because manual deployments can a lot of times lead to errors. So because you might be trying to rush through the deployments, you just want to get it done. Oftentimes, it requires a lot of steps, which I had mentioned. You have to, first of all, SSH into the server. You have to, clone or pull the new changes. You have to make sure database is up to base and up to date, and a bunch of other items. So in between these steps, we as humans are born to, we are definitely going to make mistakes sometimes. So it's inevitable. And then the next thing is delays. So when we're trying to deploy manually, we are going to see that we have a lot of delays. Delays can even range from, human error to, like, for example, internet. Like a lot of times when I was trying to deploy, I would try to log into the server or do something, and I would see that my network is really, really bad. So I couldn't even update the code base on the server to make the changes deployed in the live environment. So this was a big issue for me. And then inconsistencies. So this basically falls into the errors and delays. So what I wanted a consistent deployment environment. A case where the moment I just push my code, it deploys the code and everything is up and running in a minute to 5 minutes. And I wanted a consistent time frame. So what I needed to do was set up a CI/CD pipeline. And this is one of the disadvantages that we see when we try to deploy manually. Now, the next option is automation saves time and reduces human error. So what that means is that once we're able to abstract all of those manual operations that we have to perform to a pipeline, it is going to automatically save time for us, because we don't have to worry about performing a lot of these actions manually, as they are just taken over by the pipeline automatically. So all you just literally have to do is sit back and monitor the deployment to make sure that all your tests pass and make sure that you have no error. So it helps to save time and it helps to reduce human error. So once you are able to write a pipeline and deploy a pipeline and you've tested it and you see that it works perfectly, it really, really reduces human error. So what that means is that we as humans, we are prone to make a lot of mistakes when we're, performing manual deployments, for example. But once you have a pipeline that is tested and it's sure to work, all you have to do is just always push your code, make your changes, push your code. The pipeline runs your tests, and then once the tests pass, it deploys it automatically for you. So it saves time and reduces human error. And then the last one is it allows you to focus on what matters, building great software. So a lot of times, like I said, in the deployments, in the manual process, you are not just worrying about writing your code. You are also worrying about, okay, once I've written this code and I want to deploy this code online so that people can view the changes on the website, how exactly do I automate this process, right? So once you set up a CI/CD pipeline, it just, like I said before, it abstracts all of those manual things that you have to do. That is the logging in and deploying it manually yourself. It abstracts that away. So all you're focused on is mainly just writing the code, optimizing your code to make sure it runs properly, you have to, basically optimizing your code to make sure that it runs properly and ensuring that the entire development of the code is perfect. So that is writing good, clean code. So once you've written your code, you just push to your repository, whether it's GitHub or GitLab or whichever one you use. And then your pipeline is just going to take over from there and deploy your changes to the web. So if we move on to the next page, it says understanding CI/CD for PHP. So we have 3 steps that usually take place when you are building or automating a pipeline for your projects. So the first one is the test. Automated tests run every code change to catch bugs early. So what that means is that once you are trying to deploy your code using a pipeline, in between the pipeline stages, what you can do is you can set up different tests that you want to run in order to deploy the code. Because obviously, when you're writing your code, you need to test it first before you deploy it so that you don't push or deploy bad code to the web and then you check it and see that your entire application is down. So what you need to do is that it's just very good practice to have a lot of tests written, unit tests, integration tests, whichever test suite you choose to use. Now, what you can do is that once you've written your tests for your project, when you now want to deploy your projects to, your website, to your server or whatever, when you use a pipeline, once you push your code to the GitHub repository, the pipeline is going to take all of that code and first of all, run your tests. So it depends on how you configure your pipeline. You can configure your pipeline to first of all, run all the tests. Now, once all the tests pass, it can then move on to the build phase, which is just going to automatically compile the code and build it. Now, after building it, it then moves on to the deployment phase, which is just going to deploy your projects to the web directly. So the reason why this test phase is very important is because a lot of times you might write code in a development environment and everything might run smoothly. And a lot of times you might not even catch some bugs which are present there. But in your pipeline stage, the moment it tries to deploy your project, it is first of all going to run that specific test. And if that test does not pass, it's going to give you an error and it's going to show you what error it is as you are monitoring, the deployment process. So this is why CI/CD is very, very important, because aside just deploying the code from your repository to like the server, for example, it also ensures that whatever test you have passed into that project gets run. And if that test successfully passes, it then moves on to the next phase, which is build and deploy. So that way, it helps to just make the process very simple. So that way, it prevents you from deploying bad code to the web. Because a lot of times we might write code that might have some bugs and some bugs that we might not catch. But once you have a testing stage, what it can do is that it will just test your code, make sure that the code passes all the tests before deploying it to the web. If you were using the manual method, this would be very, very tedious. So it's just very easy to set up a testing stage and a build stage and deployment stage using your pipeline. Now we're going to move on to the next phase, which is benefits of CI/CD. So the first benefit is faster updates and faster releases. So it is very, very instant from the moment you push your code from your development environment up onto your repository. So the moment you push your code to your repository, your pipeline automatically listens to some of these changes. Now, some of the changes can be like a new pull request, a new push, a new merge. So these are changes that you can listen to, and these are events rather, that you can listen to in your repository. So the moment one of these events are fired, or the moment one of these events occurs, your workflow or your pipeline automatically starts, performing the deployment process for your project. So that helps to abstract and make things very, very fast. So we have faster updates and faster releases. This is definitely faster than having to push your code to your repository, then manually go into the server or your cPanel or wherever and deploy everything manually, because it's slower and you might have inefficiencies like, slow internet speed and things of that nature. So we have fewer bugs and improved code quality. So this boils back to what I had said previously about having several tests that run in your code for your pipeline. So the moment you push to your repository, for example, and your pipeline starts running, once you have tests in place, it is first going to run those tests to make sure that they pass properly. And the moment those test pass properly, it then moves on to the next stage of deploying your projects to the web. So that way, it helps to reduce bugs which are pushed into production. And that is why it is very important to write tests in your code. It cannot be overstressed, because there are some times where there are some cases, edge cases, or some things that you might not even factor in. But the moment you have your tests and your test pass, it will ensure that you have good code quality being pushed to the development environment. Now, even speaking of development environment, usually what big companies and usually what companies do is that, and this is the recommended way, is that you have, first of all, 2 servers, right? So the first server is going to be the staging server, and the second server is going to be the development server. So what now happens is that the moment you push your code, your CI/CD pipeline is going to take that code, perform the test, and deploy it to the staging server. So once it has deployed it to the staging server, the moment that everything is running properly, the developers go into the projects hosted on the staging server, they check to make sure that everything runs properly. The moment everything runs properly, it is then deployed to the production server or the live server. So that way, even if some bugs weren't caught during the deployment process, the bugs are going to be seen on the staging server. So the staging server is basically a place that is only accessible to people within the company, the employees, where they can test the code and see how and interact with the code basically. So it is not available to the public, and it is different it's like the website hosted, but it is hosted differently from the websites in the public domain. So I could go to my website now and type like instagram.com, and I am going to see the Instagram website. Whereas I'm sure they have different staging servers where they can go and visit the same Instagram website, but only them has access to it so that they can test and interact with the projects, first of all, before it is pushed to the development. Before it is pushed to the live production server where anybody in the world can have access to it. And then the last option is smoother workflows and better collaboration. So when you have a smooth workflow, like I said, it just basically helps to abstract all of that process. And trust me, the amount of time that you spend doing this thing manually it's really, really long. But the moment you just have a pipeline that runs all of these processes for you, it makes your life very, very easy. And you can focus on just writing your good, clean code and your tests to make sure that everything runs smoothly. So these are like some of the benefits of CI/CD, which cannot be overstressed. Now, moving on to the next step, how CI/CD works. So we have 3 things itemized here. So it says code changes are pushed to a repository, for example, GitHub, and then automated tests run and build processes run also are triggered. So automated tests and build processes are triggered. So the moment you push your code to your repository, for example, some of these automated tests and build processes get triggered immediately. So these are different events that you can listen to. For example, when you push a new code or when a new pull request is created, so you can then merge that pull request and another event is then run. So once all of these events are run, our CI/CD pipeline is going to be listening for these events. So it's just like, in JavaScript, for example, when you have an event listener that fires or that executes a specific function when an event occurs. So we can look at it the exact same way in CI/CD pipelines. So the moment an event occurs, like when a new push is made, these pipelines are immediately going to run the automated tests and build processes. Now, I am going to show you an example of a simple pipeline which I had worked on, and I made use of Jenkins. So we're also going to discuss different CI/CD tools that we can use when we're trying to deploy our PHP projects or even any other projects written in any other language. So the next option then is code is deployed to the server or cloud platform. So that is basically how it looks like from an overhead view. You push your code to your repository or a change occurs in the repository. Your workflow or your pipeline listens for that specific change. And once that event occurs, the automated tests and build processes are triggered and they run immediately. And once those tests are passed, your project then is deployed to the server without any complication. Now, this is going to be also a step-by-step visual of how it works. So the first stage is the code change, right? A developer makes a code change in a PHP project. So let's say you are working on a to-do list, for example, in PHP, and you've updated a feature, like let's say you added a new feature to email the user, maybe let's say every day, to send them an email of all the tasks they haven't completed. So let's say you've made that change and you're ready to push that change and deploy it. We now move to the next phase. We push to the repository. The code change is pushed to the Git repository, triggering a workflow. Then we now have GitHub Actions workflow. I'm going to explain what GitHub Actions is, but I want you to just follow with me. So once you push the code to the repository, it now triggers a workflow. That is, something occurs. That is, an event is fired or dispatched the moment you push to the repository. So it triggers the workflow. Then GitHub Actions workflow. It now says the workflow runs automated tests and build the project, and then move to the next one, which is deployment. The build code is deployed to the server called Cloud Platform. So I had mentioned GitHub Actions workflow. So GitHub Actions is basically it basically allows us to set up workflows and pipelines within our GitHub projects. So the reason why a lot of developers love to use GitHub Actions is because GitHub is a place where you store your projects. And what's better way to create a CI/CD pipeline than creating your CI/CD pipeline where your project lives? That is where your project's code lives in a repository. So the moment you have your project's code in a repository, what you can then do is that you can set up a pipeline within that repository to ensure that the workflow works. So I will just stop sharing, and I would just like to share my browser where I can show you guys the workflow. So just give me a moment. So I would like to show you guys an example, right? Let me share this. Can you guys see my screen?
I can see your screen.
Okay. So I would like to show you an example right now. So this is a repository that I have. It's one project I've been working on for a while. And if I look at this menu of options right here, you can see there is a tab called Actions. So what you can do is you can click Actions. Now, once you click Actions, it's going to take you to this page, and it says Get Started with GitHub Actions. So GitHub Actions are basically a way for you to create workflows in your program, in your project, I mean. So you can even set up CI/CD pipelines using these GitHub Actions. So I'm going to show you, for example, now. They already give us, for example, a bunch of these templates that we can make use of. So we can see there's a suggested section, there is a deployment section, as well as a continuous integration and automation section. So what we can then do is that, since we are talking about PHP, in the scope of PHP, we're just going to type PHP right here and click search. So the moment I click search, you can see that they already have these templates for Laravel. If you're using Laravel, for example, they have Symfony. So if you're using either the Laravel or Symfony frameworks, you can see that they already give templates that you can make use of. Or even if you're just using pure PHP, there is already a template that you can make use of right here. And the moment you go to configure, it's going to generate a YAML file for you, which is what you see here. Now, this YAML file basically outlines all the steps that the pipeline needs to follow in order to deploy your project. So, for example, this is the name of the pipeline. This is the name of the workflow, which is PHP Composer, right? And then we have this new tab here that says on, and then here we have push and pull request. So what this section basically means is that what events do we want to listen to? So we have two events here, on push and on pull request. So what this is going to do is that the moment a push request comes in or a pull request comes in, it is automatically going to run this build command, this build stage, I mean. And this build stage basically helps us to deploy our PHP projects to wherever we decide. So in this case now, we have two events, push and pull. So the moment you push your program, your code to your repository, you see that it is working with the branch main. So if you have a different branch, you could always select it. For example, in my project, I have a branch called deployment. So I could change this to deployment. And the exact same thing goes for the pull request. So the moment a pull request happens in your repository, this event is going to get fired and the deployment process is going to start immediately. So if we look at the build process, for example, now we have runs on Ubuntu latest. So we're basically telling this workflow that we want to run our projects on an Ubuntu operating system. We want to run it on the latest version of the Ubuntu operating system. So we have different steps here that the process is going to follow in order to deploy this project. Now, I'm not going to go in depth into what all of this means because I have only 1 hour, but there are tons and tons of tutorials out there that you can follow. And if you want to, if you have several questions, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. So this is my LinkedIn. You can always reach out to me and I will definitely get back to you. So this is an example of how you would make use of GitHub Actions in order to create a workflow for your repository. So I will just go back. So we also have the same for Laravel and we have the same for Symfony. So for example, I can click configure for Laravel. And the moment I get there, I can see this workflow already given to me by default. So now this is completely editable. It's just a template that they give to you by default so that you hit the ground running. So you can just enter here and make all the changes that you want. So for example, we have this phase where we are installing all the dependencies. And what we are running here is composer install-q. So basically, we're installing all the dependencies that exist in our Laravel project. And then during the next process, I'm basically deploying it. So I'm making a directory here, and we are setting up the environment variables here. So basically, this is the default configuration that GitHub gives us for some of these projects, like for PHP, Laravel, and Symfony. So if I head back to the slides right now, so let me just find it. Let me share my screen to that specific page. Give me a moment, sorry. Let's see. All right. So those are that is basically how we can set up a pipeline on GitHub. So I have this diagram here that just shows you exactly how it will run. So we have a CI/CD pipeline, and this is how it would run using GitHub Actions. So let's say somebody creates a pull request for your repository. That is, let's say somebody made a few changes in your repository and created a pull request. So if you as the admin now merges their pull request, the moment you merge that pull request, that can be an event that your workflow or your GitHub Actions stage or your GitHub Actions projects or workflow listens to. So you merge your project, you merge the pull request to your code, then an event is fired. So when that event is fired, it is then going to start running all the tests that exist within your program. Then once all those tests are run, it now goes to the build stage. And once the build stage is done, it deploys the project successfully. So that way, our tests are able to run successfully, and then we're able to deploy it without having to do all of this manually, which is really a hassle and it takes a while. Now we have popular CI/CD tools. So aside GitHub Actions is just, it's one of them, and it's very convenient for developers because you are setting up a CI/CD pipeline in the environment where your project code lives. So it's very convenient. So GitHub Actions is a popular choice for GitHub users, offering seamless integration with your repositories. So like I said, because your repositories are present in that specific environment, it's just easy to set up a pipeline because it's easily integrates with your repository because everything is still under the same GitHub repository. So you can set up GitHub Actions for your repository. Now, the next option is Jenkins. Now, this is one that I personally love using. So Jenkins is a long-standing and highly configurable option suitable for complex workflows. Now, Jenkins is another CI/CD platform that you can make use of in order to deploy your project in order to set up a CI/CD pipeline for your project. Now, the reason why I love Jenkins is because it has this very nice user interface where you can monitor every single thing. So I will just share my screen right now up onto where I have Jenkins deployed. So I will just share that. So I'm going to show you the dashboard for Jenkins. So you guys can see my screen, right? Just to confirm.
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay. So what I have here is the Jenkins dashboard. So what you first have to do is, you have to first of all install Jenkins because it's a software. You first install it on the server that you're trying to deploy to. And then after installing Jenkins, what you can then do is you can set up various CI/CD pipelines and different workflows for your project. So I would just like to show you exactly what it would look like. So I can go to the stages section. And once I go to the stages section, you can see the different stages that get to run when you run your deployment scripts. So for example, in this specific pipeline, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 8 deployment stages that get executed when I'm deploying the project. So the first stage is to update the repository. So once I push my code to the repository, what this pipeline automatically does first is that it's going to updates the repository. So it will run a Git pull in order to get all the changes that were made on the repository. So it will just pull all the changes up onto the server. So now all the updated code now exists in the server at this point. Now the next stage is to set up my environment variable file. Now, because I have a lot of environment variables, I wouldn't want to just store it directly in the code because then if anybody just visits the repository, they can basically just see all my sensitive information. For example, your Stripe API secret keys and things like that. So that stage runs successfully from my deployment script. Then the next phase is that I install all the dependencies. So what this stage just does is that it will make sure that all your dependencies are up to date and it will try to install all the dependencies that are present in the project. So if all the dependencies are already installed, then it just, it tells us that the requirements are already satisfied and it doesn't install anyone. Then the next phase is to collect static. So this phase just basically helps me to organize all my static files, my CSS, JavaScript, all my images. And here I run my migration to make sure that my database schema is up to date. And then here I restart GUnicorn, I restart Celery, Redis, and so on. So basically, all of these were the steps that I had to perform manually before. So I would manually have to log into the server, then I would have to run a Git clone in order to get all the changes that were made onto the server. And then I will have to create the env file manually and do all of this. So it was a very, very stressful process. So what I was able to do was I was able to write a pipeline that would just abstract all of these processes for me and it would do it the moment I push my code to the pipeline. Now, I would just like to show you how exactly you can configure your pipeline using Jenkins. So I'm just going to run through it. So let me just zoom here so that you guys can see it properly. So this is the deployment script that I wrote for this specific project. And you can see that this script is just 178 lines. And all it does is that it helps me automate all of those processes. So when you're making use of Jenkins, each process is broken down into a stage. As you can see, we have a stage here and we have a stage here. So each of these stages represents a different action that gets executed during the deployment phase. Like I showed you before in the previous screen, it showed you all the stages that had to be run in order to deploy these projects to the web. So this is where all of those stages were defined. So I have this stage here that executes some specific scripts in the terminal, that is in the server. So this is a different stage and a different stage. So basically, all of these stages come together in order to deploy these projects. So this is how you would make use of Jenkins in order to deploy your projects to, say, like a server, for example. And it just basically helps to abstract all of that process of making sure that your project tests run successfully, making sure that it builds successfully. Now, if I look at all the builds to the left, these are all the changes that I made. Now, you can see that some of these builds actually fail. Now, some of the builds fail because it encountered a specific error during the process of trying to deploy it. So I could look at build 184, for example, and I can go down and click the pipeline console. Now, the moment you click the pipeline console, it will open this tab for you, and it is going to show you all of the different deployment stages which were created. And it is going to show you the stage that it failed at. So it showed that this stage ran successfully, this ran, but the moment it came to collect static, it crashed with an error. So this is why pipelines are also very important, because the moment you run your pipeline, it is going to start executing each and every stage of your pipeline. And the moment it crashes, it is going to show you exactly where it's crashed, and it's going to show you the errors that were generated, so that when you are looking at your code, you can just immediately know that, okay, sorry, so that when you're looking at the deployment history, you can automatically know that, okay, the error came from this specific stage. And once you've identified the stage, you could just go into the stage and view the error logs. For example, I could make this wider, and you can see that I can identify the error from this specific error log. So that basically helps us to ensure that all the stages are run successfully. And even though there is an error, we are able to identify exactly where the error came from. So that is just another example of a pipeline that we can use. So I will switch back to my slide screen. So let me just share it now. So right here, we have talked about GitHub Actions and Jenkins. Then we also have a different option called GitLab. So GitLab is like another alternative to hosting your project on a GitHub repository. So if you like to make use of GitLab, they also have integrations for setting up CI/CD pipelines. So it says integrated into GitLab, providing a comprehensive solution for CI/CD pipelines. So if you're either making use of GitHub Actions or GitLab, be rest assured that you can automate your pipelines using these platforms. Now, I wrote a real world example here that we can look at. So it says, consider an e-commerce website. When a developer commits code, CI/CD automatically tests the changes to ensure that they don't break the shopping cart or payments gateway. Then if the tests pass, the changes are automatically deployed to a staging server for further review. Once approved, the changes are seamlessly pushed to live production server, ensuring customers will always have a smooth shopping experience. So this is exactly what I was talking about earlier. So in this case, we're looking at building an e-commerce website. So let's just say, take Jumia for an example. Let's say Jumia added a new feature to their e-commerce website, or maybe let's say their mobile application or something like that. The moment they want to push the changes to production, obviously they wouldn't just push that code to production, because there is a very high chance that that code has some bugs in it. So what they want to do first is that they want to push that code to a staging server. Now, before the code is pushed to the staging server, the CI/CD pipeline is going to listen for a push. Once that push is made, or a pull request or an event basically is made, the pipeline is then going to take all of those changes, test the code, build the code, and try to deploy it on the staging server. Once the deployment works successfully on the staging server, the Jumia employees or their developers or engineers are then going to go into the staging server, or the projects deployed on the staging server. Then they are going to test everything again to make sure that it works successfully, so that when it works successfully, they are now going to take all of those changes that they've made. Once they are sure that it is working successfully, they are then going to deploy it to the production server. So the production server is actually what we interact with as users. So when you go to Instagram.com or Jumia.com, what we are seeing right there is the websites running on a production server. So in order to prevent we as developers from pushing very bad code, or code that could have dangerous bugs in them, in order to prevent us from pushing this directly to production, we're going to first push it to staging server. And even during the process of deploying to the staging server, it runs the test for the code. And if the tests run, then the deployment is going to run successfully on the staging server. And then we as developers are then going to go to the website on the staging server to interact with it, to make sure that everything runs properly before we then deploy to the production server. And if we move on to the next page. So this is a step-by-step visual, like as usual. So the first stage is the code is pushed to the repository. Then the second stage is the pipeline takes over and it runs the automated tests that exists within the project. Then it now says the code is automatically built and packaged. And step 4 is the code is deployed to the server. And step 5 is the deployment is verified and monitored. So what this means basically is that during the deployment phase, we can look at the deployment logs that take place. So when the project is currently deploying, we can just make sure, we can just monitor it to make sure that everything deploys successfully. So I can go back to my Jenkins integration just to show you how a deployment phase would work. So I will come here now and refresh this website. Now, in order to show you how the deployment process works, I will just click build now. Now, once I click build now, it's going to start a new deployment process, as you can see. So I'm going to go to pipeline console so that we can both see, so that we can all see the deployment process. So you can see it has run all of this process. It's run this one. It's restarting Unicorn right now. It's restarting Celery. And it's just going to run through all of these stages and it's going to deploy them so that at each stage, if any error occurs, it's going to automatically catch it. So this is basically how it would work with Jenkins. So I'll just head back to my slides. So I'll just click share slides. All right. So we're going to move to the next page, which is the key takeaways and next steps. So the first step is to embrace CI/CD and streamline your PHP workflow. So I can understand that, for example, if you're building a simple PHP project and you have like a cPanel hosting, for example, I know that all you just have to do is technically copy all your PHP files, go to the cPanel and just dump your PHP files there and access it from the domain or the URL. But the moment you are able to embrace and understand how CI/CD pipeline works, it's going to make your life a whole lot easier. And if you are going to be using manual deployments, it even gets a whole lot more complicated when you start building very large scale applications and using like a framework like Laravel or Symfony. So when you're building these very large scale applications and you're making use of these large frameworks, if you are going to deploy manually, it's going to get very hectic at some point because then you're going to have to worry about, are your database schema up to date when you're deploying? Are your tests running properly when you're deploying? So all of these can be handled by setting up a pipeline, which is just going to make life very easy. Now, the next one is choose the right tools and learn from resources. So like we had talked about, there are different tools that you can make use of in order to set up a pipeline. So you can make use of, GitHub Actions like we looked at. You can make use of Jenkins, or you can make use of even, let's say, for example, GitLab, if your project is on GitLab. So there are a lot of options that you could choose from. Now, what you need to do is identify the proper tool to work with. So it is often good to try out a bunch of these technologies. So it's good to try out GitLab. It's good to try out GitHub Actions. It's good to try out Jenkins and a bunch of other technologies. Now, once you've tried out different technologies or tools, what you can then do is select the one that you are most confident using. Once you select the one that you are most confident using and the one that makes life easy for you, then you can then go with that specific option. Because I do understand that when you are, first of all, learning how to integrate these tools, it can get complex and confusing. The first time I integrated Jenkins into a project, my build failed about 25 times. So you can imagine how stressful that would have been trying to set up a pipeline and the pipeline keeps failing. It's failed 25 whole times. And I got really frustrated until it ran on the 26th build. So learning some of these tools might be complex, it might be confusing, but there are a bunch of resources out there. There's a lot of resources out there that you can learn from. And all you have to do is just choose the right tool and have an exercise patience because you are not going to hit the ground and start running immediately. It's going to take a while because there's a bit of a learning curve. Now, the next thing is implement small and have frequent deployments. So what that means is that when you are working in your project, you do not want to make like 1,000-line change and push to GitHub. That is looked at as a bad practice. because you don't want to make such a very, very big change and push at once. What happens during that process is that, let's say you go into your project has 100,000 lines of code. Let's just say you make multiple changes and you change like 20,000 lines of code without pushing at once, without pushing in between each change. The moment you push those changes, where you change 20,000 lines of code, the moment you push it to your server or your GitHub repository, you have a very high chance of breaking something. And then when you break something, it is very hard to debug where the error is coming from, because you made 20,000 lines of code. So managing something like that is going to be really, really difficult. So what you need to do is implement small and have frequent deployments. So what that means is that once you make like a few changes in a specific section of your project, let's just say you make some changes to the authentication bits, you should make a commit and push. When you make a change in your payments gateway integration, for example, you should make a commit and push that section. You shouldn't wait until you make all the changes that you want to make. So you make authentication changes, you make payments changes, you make your data, you change your database schema, you change different flows in your program. You shouldn't wait up until when you've made like 10, 15, 20 changes until you push to your repository. What you want to do is you want to plan ahead and plan and break it down into different sections. So you're going to say, okay, I am going to update this payments gateway. Let's say you want to integrate Paystack or Flutterwave into your project, for example. What you need to do is say, okay, I am going to integrate Paystack into this project. And once I have integrated Paystack into the project, I am going to make this push. So that is what you should do. What you shouldn't do is, for example, say, I am going to integrate Paystack. I am going to integrate Google authentication. I'm going to integrate Apple authentication, and then I will push. That isn't the best way to do it, because the moment you have an error, debugging becomes difficult, because you have this bunch of hundreds and thousands of lines of code that you have pushed, and managing it becomes difficult. So what you want to do is implement small and have frequent deployments. And then the last thing is stay organized, test thoroughly, and avoid common pitfalls. So testing cannot be overemphasized, as you have heard me talk about testing a lot, because this is something that is that can be very, very disastrous. Imagine a company imagine you have a very large company with tens of thousands of users. Now imagine that company generates revenue every single day. So at any given point in time, let's just imagine somebody's making a purchase on your website. Now, the moment you make a change and you push to your repository and that code gets deployed without having proper tests, what now happens is that your website becomes, your website gets shut down because of the terrible code. So your website starts giving an error. Therefore, your customers cannot interact with your website. They can't make payments. They can't perform the activities that they were meant to perform on your website. So that way you are losing money, you're losing customers, and you're even losing customer trust, because imagine you have a very, very sensitive software that you have built. Now, let's just say you have some software that manages finance. Let's just say it manages a user's finance. The moment that software goes down, you are basically losing customer trust, because I wouldn't want to entrust my money and my finances to a platform or to a website that goes down like that, or that has, a bug or some technical difficulty, because that would very, very much destroy customer trust. So in a case like that, you might even lose customers, therefore losing money. So what you want to do is make sure you have tests. You have tests in place that thoroughly run through the code and make sure that everything works perfectly and successfully. So that is all I have prepared, and that is all I am going to talk about in this presentation. So if you have any question, please, you can ask and I will reply.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Ayodeji. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. Yeah, thank you everybody for staying back until this moment. All right, so let's note down our questions. So once the second speaker is done with his speech, we can chip in our questions. But for now, let's just note that down. Thank you, Mr. Adeji, for that wonderful presentation. We really appreciate it. All right, without wasting much of our time, I'd like to introduce our second speaker, the person of Mr. Oladimeji Arokoyo. So, Mr. Arokoyo Oladimeji is a backend developer, a PHP and Laravel expert with strong expertise in PHP, Laravel, and MySQL. With years of experience in backend development, Arokoyo Oladimeji David has worked on various web applications, implementing robust authentication systems, optimizing database queries, and integrating third-party APIs for seamless functionality. He is currently serving as a PHP backend developer at Bincom Dev Center and is deeply involved in designing and maintaining scalable backend architectures. His proficiency in frameworks such as Laravel and E allows him to build dynamic applications, ensuring efficiency, security, and optimal performance. Beyond his professional role, Oladimeji David has worked on projects like Talent Star, an innovative talent hub platform Apologies about that. I got kicked out. Please confirm if you can still hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. So, in addition to his backend expertise, Arokoye Oladimeji span across C#, MVC, Git, and Azure-based deployments, further diversifying his technical stack. So, without wasting much of our time, I would like to officially welcome Mr. Oladimeji. Mr. Oladimeji, you're welcome, sir. It's good to have you among us. Please, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can.
All right. You can have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Antonia. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for the time. Mr. Ayodeji, thank you very much. That was a wonderful presentation. As a matter of fact, with that presentation, I'll be doing a lot of repetition. We don't really have much to say. But at the same time, maybe I'm thinking we could have a practical, we just do a practical. But before we go into that, let me just share my slide and just go over one or two things. Basically, everything has been said already. Justice has already been done to this, but that notwithstanding, I still need to. So sharing my screen. Okay. Is my screen visible? Hello, can anyone still hear me?
Yeah, your screen is visible and we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So basically, CI/CD stands for continuous integration and continuous deployment and delivery. Just like it's been mentioned earlier, for efficiency's sake and for safety purposes, we need CI/CD. All right. Just like it says, continuous integration and continuous deployment because it helps reduce manual errors like Mr. Ayodeji mentioned earlier, you pushing to updating a website, an e-commerce website without running tests and then the site gets broken or something, really want to speak well of an organization. So that's why it's necessary, it's compulsory for us to pass through these processes. So basically, Mr. Ayodeji already said a lot. Let me see. So I think I'll just go. So we'll be looking at CI/CD with GitLab, right? So basically, this is what we'll be going through today. We've already seen the benefits of CI/CD to say that for build, for test, then deployment. You write your code, you push your code to your repository, pass, you have your file, your script runs the test. Then once the test is passed, before you can deploy. Like for instance, in Beacon here, the way we but before our project is pushed online, you first pass through the dev branch. Once the test is passed, then the staging branch again before you can even push to production, the master branch and product. So without these steps, there's no way your code can even get to the live server. It's not possible. It must have gone through every step that is needed to be. That is to say, you push to dev, or if you're working from the GitLab, I'm talking like if you're working from your local machine, yeah, you push to dev, or if you're working from maybe a cloud environment or wherever you're working from, you push to dev. Your test is run. Once the continuous integration is passed, then the deployment takes place. But basically, there has to be that processes. And I think Mr. Ayodiji also mentioned like updating features, right? Let's say you want to update a feature, it makes it very easy because continually you're working from the back end. You're not disturbing the front end, whatever is happening on the live server, you're not disturbing anything. You're continually working. So it makes it easy to release new features, right? You can easily release new features for an application simply because you're not even you're to like the process of pushing, then going to SSH into the server and start pulling and start running various codes to update various dependencies and the rest. It would it would really it would be stressful. It would disturb because definitely you need to have the downtime. You need to have downtime on your website to say, oh, maybe website is undergoing maintenance and we won't be available for this. But to prevent all this, that's why we have CI/CD, right? So we're continually working. Then also uh, for for speed, yeah, for speed also, because if you have different team members working at the same time, everyone pushing and testing their codes. Then once their code is passed, whatever function you're working on, whatever feature you're working on, you it's passed, then you push to the you make your merge request. Once it's being reviewed and everything is fine, then it's pushed to deploy. It's being deployed to the live server. So it saves time. It makes your code efficient. Makes it saves a lot. So that's why we use CI/CD. So I really won't be going through my slide anymore because basically I think everything has already been covered in this. So basically what I would say maybe we do now is okay, we could use Laravel, I don't know. So we could set up a Laravel project from scratch up, right? Because okay, I would be saying we'll be using GitLab CI/CD. I don't know if with our PCs, PC laptops. I don't know if with our PC. So basically, what I would want us to do is, I believe, okay, well, uh, okay, based on the fact that everyone definitely are not on the same level, we have some on beginners level and different levels. So I think that really won't work. Or Antonia, is your system on? Can you share screen? Then we'll just build a project and then run the CI/CD and then see the whole process through that. So basically, what we'll be doing is we'll be setting up a Laravel project on our local system, on our local machine, and I definitely, if you have a GitLab account, so you create a repo on your GitLab, then we'll push. Let me first. Is your system running? And Antonia, sorry, I don't know.
No, sir, it went off a few minutes ago. I had to
Okay,
join my phone.
okay, that's fine. Okay, so let me just basically do some explanation of this. So basically, if you're working with a project from scratch, you would first want to, let's say maybe you're working from your local, and you first want to create the project on your local by running the command that whatever project it is, if it's a Laravel project, React. No, let's not talk. I'll be focusing on PHP and PHP frameworks, right? Because this PHP meetup. So let's say Laravel, and you're setting that up. You have to set it up first on your local. So let me see. I believe I'm sharing my entire screen. I need to reshare what I. Sorry, I'm not. Am I sharing my entire screen? Or I need to. Hello. I need to go to the next slide. Hello, can anyone hear me?
I can hear you, sir.
Okay. Okay, I think I need to be moving from various screens to various screens like that. So basically what we want to happen on GitLab is when after creating our project on our local environment, right? And we connect to our repo with running Git init and maybe Git remote to connect to our repo. Then we push what we have on our local to the to GitLab. I'm using GitLab, by the way. I'm using GitLab. So we push to GitLab. Basically, when you're on GitLab now, what you want to do first is to work on the YAM file. The YAM file is basically the file that is responsible for the CI/CD. That's the script that runs every command, your test and your deploy. So let me just go to the should be somewhere here. So let's just take a look at how I was working on a project last night to do this. So okay, so basically this is how our YAM file will look like. This is the So basically, the stages we're having here, we're testing and we're deploying. That's the basic things that this script here would do. We first test and then deploy after testing is done. So on our testing, this is what we want to our image is PHP 8.2. So depending on the PHP you're running, you need to specify. If not, you might encounter some errors and the rest. Also, we have to update our dependencies to ensure that no outdated stuff, then also run composer install to install your dependencies that are needed. Then, yeah, then the deploy stage is where this is basically this first stage is the test, and the test will basically be carried out on every branch. But for the deploy, you can see that it says only main. That is to say, before we want to deploy, it's only from the main branch to say if we are if I push to if I push to dev, definitely there won't be any deployment, but there will be tests until wherever I'm pushing to, there's nothing happens until I make a merge request to my main. So basically, you've tested when you push to your when you push to your GitLab and then the CI runs, the test passed. you are still meant to, the best approach is still to push to staging environment. Also, you should have like 3 environments or two might be okay, or 3. Then from there you also have your script run again to test that everything on your code, it's perfect. That is just running the PHP unit test here up here. That's basically the test we're running here to ensure every of our dependencies are up to date and everything that is required. And mind you, this is for Laravel project. It's would your code will be your script will be different with um another framework and that stuff. So this is basically for Laravel. So and now we're deploying from main, we deploy to the server. That is to say, whenever we merge to our main, that is when this deploy action takes place. If not, the deploy action would not take place until there's something going on the main, until that trigger of the merge request is picked. That is when deployment takes place. If not, deployment to the server doesn't take place. Then also we have we need to set our SSH private key and public key, because definitely you don't just want anybody to push to your live server, right? So that's why you need all this authentication method to state that, okay, I'm pushing I'm checking this to ensure that, okay, this person has access to push to this. This is one way we can do it. There's other ways also we can still run this in case probably you encounter error whereby you are denied SSH access. Maybe sometimes there's this error of connection refused. Maybe the SSH is disabled and maybe you're using a shared hosting platform and probably causing some delays before you get a response from support. You can also go, okay, let's be done with this, then we'll look at that also. So basically, this is just running the deployment. Once everything is passed the check, everything goes perfectly and it doesn't fail, then we push to the our server, which we have the location and everything here that needs to be done. The command is here. Everything that needs to be done is here. So basically, once the test is passed, the deployment stage is passed, then the next thing is to connect to our server and then push to our server, our live server. Then also, if and another way is to have your script. You can also have your, let me move to another screen. You can also have your deploy script on your server, right? Yeah. So to say you'd already have a webhook that you would run from GitLab whenever a particular event takes place. So you're doing basically that is going to set that event. So once that event takes place, that there's a trigger and the webhook calls the webhook URL on our server end. Then whatever command we have on that deploy script, we pick and then our deployment takes place. So let me just show an example of that. Sorry. Let's, okay. Okay, so I think this is how do I get this thing off here? How do I move this thing away? Okay. 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 I want to move this thing to this side of my screen, but it's fine. So basically, this is how a deploy script will look on your server. So basically, what this is doing is first, okay, here we're just assigning variables here. We're just saying our project directory. This is our project directory. This is our repo URL. Then the branch where we actually want to pull from is our main branch. Then these are just to state what's actually going on at each step, so that basically you might not really want to do all this, but basically every step here is just to show every process. You want to see every process as everything is happening. So when you have an error, you know where that error happened and what caused the error. You can still add some more debugging to your, it depends, it's just personal preference what you want to do. Yeah, yeah, that is how this. So basically, how this works is that, and now we have this script here. This script, what this script is doing is pulling from the repo that we've already, like we can see on line 8, git.gitlab. This is where I'm pulling from, and this is the project directory where I want to pull to. Then it will go down. If the directory is not found or something goes wrong, it throws an error. Then we fetch the changes from our remote repository, which is on line 8. We fetch, we run, these are various git commands. In case there's a merge conflicts, we fix the merge conflicts before everything. We install the dependency, run composer, optimize autoloader, then run our migration. Basically, what the script is just doing is basically our Laravel setup. That's what the script is basically doing. And once this deploy, before this would be called, it will be called from our GitLab. When let me go back to our GitLab. Um, Okay, so we're back at our GitLab. So basically, this is the webhooks, and I believe, okay, even though not most of us will know what webhooks are. Like, if, for instance, like we're speaking about an e-commerce store, and in an e-commerce store, we might want to have integrate a third-party gateway for payment. Maybe this, right? We would have a webhook URL on our server that would submit to maybe Paystack or whatever we're using, so that whenever an event occurs, that webhook is being called to be notified about that particular event that just took place. Then on that webhook would have uh, a command or some things that we want to happen once ever this webhook URL is being called. Once ever this webhook URL is being called, there are actions that will take place, which we have already told that URL to do. So it's always there. So the same thing here with our GitLab webhooks. It will call our webhook URL when a particular event happens. So let's go to the add. That is, now you'll be using this when you're having issues with the with the YAM file, well, probably SSH issue, because here now basically what you need to connect at this point is your let's see, am I creating a new? Okay, we'll get there. I think I'm clear. So now this is where you have on your server already, you have your URL, where your webhook URL, right? Because you can't run your script, because that script we just shared is a .sh file. So you definitely can run it on your browser like that. Yes, you can run it on your browser. You will need you will need it to be executed, and that execution would be called from the URL here that we are going to place here. So basically, it's that URL that will be entering to this URL webhook URL here. So let's say, for instance, my webhook URL might be what website should I say? Okay, emigrate.com/deploy.php. That could be my webhook URL. emigrate.com/deploy.php. I would put it here. Emigrate.com, right? Slash what do I call it? Deploy, right? Deploy.php. So basically, then next thing I'll do is to go show full URL, name option, and the description. Then here, what I would have to do, I would create a secret token. So anytime this, we'll soon go back to the URL file, to the webhook URL file. So anytime this webhook URL is being called, our token, there will be a check to say if the token that is being saved, is being defined on our file, is the same thing as the token that will be going with our header when this webhook event takes place. If they are the same thing, then we're authorized to carry any action on that webhook. If not, it will return an unauthenticated error. We'll see the script shortly, but basically let's be done with the webhook. So now we'll get a secret, we put a secret token of your choice. Just make the token there and save it. Then what should happen before this particular webhook event take place? What should trigger this? What should trigger this event? What should trigger this webhook? That is to say, I want to call deploy.php on my server. What should happen before this will be called? That is what we're going to state here. So maybe if there's a push event, but I don't even want that to happen. But let's say if I have a development like on my server, I have live and dev. Yes, and I want to do this for a push event, then specify the webhook URL for my dev environment. But for now, we're just basically, for now, I just got a message from the support team. They were having issue for my web host. They were having issue, so I think they just got that fixed. So then so now the trigger here, whatever you want to happen is to pick your webhook. This is where you define it. So what I want is a merge request. When a merge request is made, or basically when maybe when I'm deployment event. So let's say from that YAM file that we have already, the test has been carried out, then deployment. Oh no, let's use the merge. Let's use the merge request because it's either way. Let's use the merge request. So to say that when after all the tests, we test on dev on staging, then we'll make a merge request to the master. That is when this webhook should trigger. That is when this webhook should be triggered. Then immediately that event takes place, this webhook here will be triggered. Then it's going to call this guy here. It's going to call this guy here, deploy.php. It's going to call this guy here. Now, okay. I think I exposed. It's fine. Anyway, it's a video. So this would check, okay, I already have the variable set here with my secrets. So you can see there's a check here to say, okay, what is coming in and what, because definitely anybody can call this guy here, this deploy.php, anyone, if and yeah, an attacker and hacker, anybody would do anything here. So basically, for it to be coming from the authenticated user who is authenticated to be here, that's why we need to set this. If not, you can still leave it open, but that's risky, that's dangerous, right? Definitely, we don't want to do that. So that's why we have to set this up. And so it runs the check, and once the check is passed, then it now tries to execute this. Oh, okay, there's a mistake here. It should have deploy sh. Okay, so it now tries to deploy this guy. It tries to execute this guy here, this deploy.sh. We have to specify the location of deploy.sh file here. That's basically what this guy here is going to do. This guy is going to do, is going to call. So it's going to execute this. It's going to call this, and what we have here would then run. So basically, two things is happening on our server. First, this is our web hook URL. This is the web hook URL I was talking about. You can see deploy.php. This is web hook URL. What happened? Why am I having the red? Okay, it's because of the this guy here. Is deployed. And the way has been deployed now. What's wrong with this one? Oops. Critical states. So okay. Because basically, I don't see any error here. Right. Okay, I'll just go ahead for now. Okay, so basically, this, as I said earlier, this is the web URL that is being called. So the check goes on to say, okay, this guy is authenticated. Then it runs the script. So here we have the script here. Now here we assigned our project directory, our repo, our main, then we run the command. So basically what's happening here is to say, once there's a merge request, okay, for instance, I make a change here, then I push, okay, let me see, what can I change? Resources, okay, so the welcome for Control A, Control. Did I make any change here? So why was this guy showing error before? So Okay, so let's say I add my changes. Then I want to commit. What did I just do? What did I even do now? Okay, update my work complete. Uh, then I want to push to I want to push I want to push git push. Okay. So basically this is pushing my changes to my GitLab repo, and okay, that has been pushed. So let me change my screen to what am I going to GitLab, right? So it's before. Where is this tab not showing? Show all windows. Sorry for the delay, please. I'm trying to look for the tab. Okay. Sorry, so this is the tab here. All right, so basically I just pushed to this. I just pushed to this guy here. To the dev environment. So basically this is the push 1 minute ago. And okay, let's check out the test. The test was passed. So basically let's check out what happened on that pipeline. Okay, so basically it's run up to so Debian dependencies. Basically, this is the test that was that everything we did on that test script on our YAML file. Basically, that is what's going on here. That's what's just happening here, and the test has been passed successfully. So we'll now go to we'll now go. Definitely, we've already viewed from our URL also. But basically, you still need to have a user interface of what you need to have a visual of what you're working on. So even though everything has passed, everything is working fine, then you still need to go ahead and run your and look from your GUI to see. So basically now I would want to create a merge request. So if now I'm making a merge request to the main, and let's remember that I stated on the webhook setting that whenever I'm making a merge request, then this should be triggered. My webhook should be called and then a particular event takes place. So there's no need to do any settings or check anything. Let's just go ahead and create merge requests. Okay, basically, so we don't have a conflict. I don't want to delete my source branch. And then we just go ahead and merge. So immediately we merge, what happens here? Now our pipeline is running. This pipeline would fail because I don't know what's wrong with the hosting guys I'm using since last night. I noticed this error last night and they said they've been working on it for over a week. So I don't know what's going on. But once this is done, let's go to the webbook and see. We'll go to that particular webbook and see what event took place. Oh, sorry, am I coming to? It is the webbook now. So I think there's the guy I'm calling right. Also, you can also test your webbook even before you're making your merge request. You can always test your webbook. When you test the webbook, you would get your response from them. Then you would know if it's working or you still need to make some update on it. So merge request error 7 hours ago. So the request I just made did not. So if you check out this error, as I said last night, I was working on this. You would notice it says that shell exec is disabled. So that's why I had to reach out to the hosting team that what happened. Why is the shell exec disabled? Because I'm trying to execute a script and they said we were having issues. So that's why we might not be able to see the, but let me go back to this. This is even supposed to pick the merge request I just made. Um, okay. Another one to take. Basically, this is the process. Okay, okay. I didn't set that merge request. That's why. Because our deployment is failing. So our time is fast spent. So basically, that's why that webhook didn't work. So let me just try to make another change. Or basically, I know we've all seen that's just the process with using the GitLab CI/CD. You either use your YAM file to deploy, or use you have a script on your server that is being called by your webhook on your GitLab webhook, calls the URL. The URL runs the script, executes the script, and once the script is executed, you would see your changes would immediately apply on your on your um, on your server. So basically, I think that's because if we say we should stay here, one thing and the other might keep coming up. But let me see something. Hmm. Okay. Okay, so if